Always like to connect, to go within and to connect with the spirit, with the highest. I don't even know what you call it, with the highest level, the highest communication that I have. Usually before I start a video, but I like to put it on video as like an archive. I like to sort of close my eyes and have those little moments, because I often have people ask me about those little moments and the top of my crown gets itchy and stuff. But when they ask me what I'm doing there, what happens in my head or in my mind when that's going on, it's like communication. It's just a moment of joining, or a moment of realizing a connectedness would be better. There's not really joining, because you're never really separate. I'm not separate from anyone or anything. It's like two old friends bumping into each other and remembering the reflection of each other, and Tweedledee and Tweedledum or something. So I thought I'd make this video about the spiritual path as being a journey into fear. Because it is a journey into fear. And it doesn't matter how often you read that in the Course in Miracles or in the Bible, walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall not fear. Well, you will fear. You will have all these sorts of excuses and reasons why fear will come up, but the fear comes up for its release, for its healing, for the forgiveness of the idea of what it is that seems to give fear a foundation, being the belief in separation from source, separation from God or universal mind. It's one thing to read that in a text or a scripture or something like that, a spiritual book. And it's another thing to actually be in the experience of it yourself. Because in the experience, in the actual experience of being in that place where one reality transcends or gives way to source reality or to true reality, it is incredibly fearful. It's like standing on the top of the high diving board for the first time, looking down into the swimming pool, knowing that you've got to jump, or it's like a little child in the supermarket lost from their parent, and the anxiety just comes up and up and up, and or like a small child in the bathtub and having an unreasonable fear that when the plug's pulled out, they're going to go down the hole with the water. And there's a very real kind of a terror associated with that. And seen rightly, that fear, that existential fear, it's all existential anxiety, that existential place where you feel that internal angst rising up out of control. You can't control it. It makes you want to sedate yourself or run away from the situation or people that you're with at the time to try and avoid it, to try and get away from it. And because the ego mind always puts everything outside and says, oh, it's this person or this situation that's making me feel anxious. I need to get away from that. And of course, running away or getting drunk or any of these such things. But seen rightly, it's the call to awaken, right? Because the spiritual journey is a journey into fear. I know a lot of people that I talk to about all sorts of things that seem to qualify as spiritually applicable. Tell me all kinds of lovely stories about how spiritual is soft and gentle and everything like that. And it is at first. It is. Of course it is. You're following the way of the heart, and you're having all these lovely things that you come into contact with that are giving you some kind of a sense of a higher purpose and all of this sort of stuff, until finally you get to the end of that place where the heart can go no further, and you realize you're being supported by a higher power, and you want to know what that is. Something inside you just says, I want to have an experience now. And that can take lifetimes to reach that place, or it can just take a little bit of willingness to step up and say, all right, I see what's on offer here in the world. I don't want it. I want something else. And that in itself can be a little bit daunting, because the world always seems to dangle a carrot, and it's like, oh, look, something shiny over there. I'll go and check that out. And another ashram or another temple, another teaching, another practice. There's always going to be something. But the place of I am, the place of God is within the inner altar, the inner sanctum. And the step from the external realm to the internal one is not usually met without some kind of terror. And Jesus talks about it in A Course in Miracles as a tiny moment of terror, perhaps. When it happened to me, a tiny moment of terror was the biggest understatement that I could have read of anything you'd written in that book. It was horrific. I'd just had revelation. I'd just had the enlightenment of my mind, where I left my body, left the physical world. I saw it all disappear, everyone and everything, including my physical form, the avatar that I'm using now to make this video, and found myself back in eternity without a body, and recognized everyone and everything as the one thing, being the whole self, or God, and had all the accompanying downloads that go along with that. But when I found myself back in the physical world with the recognition that I don't exist as this, as charming as it is, and as useful as it might be, that was terrifying. I didn't want to accept it. I couldn't accept it. My mind rejected it at every turn, even though I literally just had the experience of the non-existence of the physical form and the physical realm in its entirety. And to go beyond that in this video and try to describe the appearance, or the seeming appearance of things, and how it doesn't actually exist, puts us into the territory of the paradox, which I don't want to approach right now, because that takes us to the miracle, and the miracle takes us to revelation, and we're back to illumination again, where that tiny moment of terror is about to approach the mind. So I wanted to stick primarily to that tiny moment of terror. Right now, the idea that it's a threshold. If you don't know what a threshold is, it's like all of a sudden, if you imagine the person that was in the barrel at Niagara Falls, if they had a window in there and they went over, and if you don't know that story, look it up, it's an incredible story. I think it was a woman went over the Niagara Falls in a barrel, and God knows why anyone does anything, including that, but that's thrill-seeking back then, I suppose, setting a record or doing something no one had done before. But put into a barrel. And as she went down the river towards Niagara Falls, towards the thing, she approached a threshold where it was too late to turn back. No one could stop her. She couldn't stop her. It was inevitable. She was going over. And that moment of realization is the threshold. Now, there's a point in your own consciousness where, usually reached during meditation, sometimes spontaneously. I mean, the will of God is triggered and active, and everything within you by grace. By grace, it can just happen. You could be washing the dishes and suddenly feel anxiety come upon you. Right? But obviously not many people are going to wash the dishes and associate anxiety with washing the dishes. They might associate depression with washing the dishes, or boredom or something, but hardly existential anxiety. But anyway, if we look at it through the idea of meditation, the whole point of meditation is to still the mind, to bring the mind to a point of silence, to bring the mind to a point of inner listening, where not only can your internal guidance be heard, which can be a literal voice, it can be a sense of things, it can be any kind of clairvoyant direction, or don't limit what you think internal guidance can look like or appear as. But the realization of that internal guidance is only and see if you can hear this, right? The realization of internal guidance and the recognition of that internal guidance in the individual association is only to bring the mind to a more clear perspective on the fact that there is something greater going on, right? To bring you into that place where the threshold of self-ignorance to self-realization is, and where that moment actually occurs. So for many people who study A Course in Miracles and aren't experiencing any fear, it's very, very easy to read that book and only read the nice parts. Right? And I don't say that with any venom at all. I say that with 26, 27 years of being heavily associated almost on a daily basis with other people doing the course who either come to me or write to me, or we're in a group together or some kind of thing going on, where it dawns on me that there is no understanding in the mind yet that this is a journey into fear, and that the idea of giving up the world generally tends to present the idea to them of giving up only that which they don't want, right? But there's a further understanding to that, that once you realize that there's nothing in the world that you want, it actually entails giving it up in its entirety. Obviously not in the physical sense, unless illumination is at hand, but in the sense that I'm going to let go of all the meaning I've given it. Right, because it doesn't actually mean anything when I look out there at the sun going down behind me, which is just set. It doesn't mean anything. You could say, oh, that's pretty and that's lovely, that's nice, I wish I was there, and you might have all these emotional things to it, but you've ascribed that to it yourself. Just looking at it ordinarily, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, what is that? It's just, I don't even know why I'm in the world, right? So you just look at it, it's like, there's a sun, there's a planet, there's a moon, there's a whole thing being there. It doesn't mean anything. Now, in the absence of that place where I refuse to give it a meaning, and I'm willing to let go of the meaning I've given it, the truth about it can be revealed to me, okay? And that's the place where the terror comes up. It's like, oh, if I let go of the meaning that I've given everything, which has been a long-established way that I've felt, made myself feel comfortable here in the world, then what's going to happen? That existential anxiety about being in a meaningless world where I don't know what the hell I'm doing here is going to come up again. It's going to rise up. I've been trying to push it down and tell myself that this is this and that's that, and the whole thing is whatever I think it is, and we all agree that it is, and we've got this kind of subliminal handshake on the fact that this is how the world is, and planets orbiting, stars and everything else. But actually nobody knows. No one knows the meaning of life. I mean, I do. And I know a handful of others who do, who've transcended the physical realm and had other experiences through meditation and prayer and by the grace of God. But the idea of the journey into fear is something that needs to be taken on board, because at some point fear is going to come up, and you're either going to embrace it and be like, yes, I'm discovering fear, hooray, hooray, or, and that's from an objective point of view, like being the observer of it, of your own state, or you're going to interact with that fear, get caught up in it and become extremely fearful and try to do something about it, right? All I'm ever going to tell you is don't adjust to your fear. Don't waste your pain. Don't try to do something about it. Be still, right? The ego is very, very good at convincing you that that fear and that existential anxiety that comes up is going to be the end of you, and you're going to disappear into oblivion and all that sort of stuff. And in a certain sense, yes, and in another sense, no. The you that you think you are watching this video will cease to exist, and the true you that's in, let's talk about it as, is in a coma, and if you've seen The Matrix, is in the red jelly. The true you in the red jelly is going to wake up, or the true you that's in a coma in eternity, or is asleep in the Garden of Eden. God put Adam into a deep sleep, and there's nowhere where it says he woke him up until Jesus came along and commanded you to awaken, like through this video, for those of you who weren't literally there 2,300 years ago, whatever it was, 2,030 years ago. That'll be the truth. You'll find the truth of yourself, right? That's going to be terrifying on one hand and liberating on the other. And the moment of terror and the unsettledness that you have regarding that prospect, it will pass and it will become easier for you to confront the more familiar you make yourself with the idea that this actually is a journey into fear. I've had a lot of students run away as soon as I confront them with the fear of non-existent self versus eternal self, and it's like, it's very simple. You just have to understand that what's true is eternal. What's not true is what's not eternal is temporary. It's a learning device, temporary, and you arrive here, boom, boom, the universe teaches you a bunch of lessons, and you either learn them or you don't, and you progress in the journey of your soul or you don't, and then you move on or you don't. So anyway, I think that covers that pretty well. Familiarize yourself. Like it's one thing to talk about it and to say it, but it's another thing to sort of prepare your mind for the idea of what's about to occur to you. And Jesus says in the Course, you're learning to become revelation ready, right? Part of that learning, apart from the fact through being miracle-minded or through living in faith, but part of that readiness is coming to an internal and personal acceptance of the fact that there's going to be a moment, like the caterpillar going into the thing and coming out as the butterfly, the chrysalis and coming out as the butterfly. There's going to be a moment where everything changes, where corruption takes on incorruptibility, where the old wine needs the new, the old skins, the new wine can't be put into the old skins, and you have to be reborn again. And that's an actual experience. It's not just something that you eat some bread and drink some wine, communion, if you're a religious person, or it's not something that occurs just through the symbolic action of baptism. Baptism is an idea that means to repent, to turn around and to give your life to God, right? You're changing from your old way, but that's an actual process of purification. It's like the symbolic marking of that process might be that you get dunked in the water and you come up with witnesses who've going to hold you to account that you're now going to change your ways, but your ways have to change, right? You do undergo that metamorphosis. You do become the butterfly, and the trepidation that you might feel about that and might have about that approaches as an onset of existential anxiety. Don't adjust, breathe, let it happen. Be still, allow it to come up. Hopefully by that time you have a lot of faith. You'll have been practicing and making bold experiments with faith and giving your life to God in places where it becomes simply undeterminable, which is pretty well every day for me. But that's a joyous thing now, to not know, to live in the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. It's just going to have to be a miracle to live that way, to live miracly minded. It's beautiful. All right, don't waste your pain. This is a journey into fear. Use it for prayer. Use it for the prayer of the heart. Help me, Father. Help me to be still. Help me, Lord. And undergo what you need to undergo. This is a physical awakening. The body is included. Whether it exists or doesn't exist, whether you want to talk about it or not talk about it, it's included in, because you're one with everything, that which you imagine to be real and that which isn't real, and that which is real and that which you can't imagine to be real, all of these things together. It's all one. Peace.